work. He is the co-founder and the CEO of eCar, which is currently the fastest growing car share app in the Middle East. And before I get too excited and go on, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Hedberg to continue on himself and the company.
And thank you very much, everyone, for having me. It's an honor to be here. So maybe it would be a good idea to give you guys a brief on eCar and sort of the journey on how basically I got to where I am today, and maybe looking at what we're looking to do in the future as well. Because I was where you guys are right now at some point in my career and development, and sometimes it's about timing and sometimes it's about just jumping off the cliff and going for it.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm very interested to learn all of your stories as well, so I'm not going to spend too much time on my thing. We can ask questions as you see fit and as you dare. But effectively, I started my first company about 7 years ago. My very first idea of starting a company, I was about 24, and I wanted to start a consultancy business, but that didn't really pan out. I realized very quickly that I needed a career job first. And I figured at that time, in Norway, where I'm from, you have sort of two options. You have oil and gas, or you have shipping. Those are the two kind of sectors that are very common in Norway. And so I got into shipping, and I worked in shipping for about 7 years. And I think this is after my MBA. And I realized that was for me, that was a good choice because I ended up learning and making a lot of mistakes along the way on the company's dime. I wasn't paying for those mistakes myself. I was being paid to learn and to perform a job. And I think ultimately that made me more prepared for the entrepreneurial journey. That being said, there's nothing wrong whatsoever if you have the bug and you have a good idea. As a university student, there's a tremendous amount of success cases that are out there of university students that take on board an idea and then bring it to fruition and become magnificently successful doing it. Really, eCar came into the picture about 4 or 5 years ago. I was actually in a swimming pool in Dubai. This is how these ideas happen. You never know what it comes from. I'm sure you guys have experienced the same kind of thing. But for me, I was in a swimming pool at my friend's apartment complex in Dubai Marina, and we were chatting about business ideas. At this point, my company QMS, my other company, which is a ISO certification business, had grown to the point where I no longer needed to do any work for the company. I hired a manager who ran it. I had at that time around 10 or so auditors that would do the work. So I was effectively a bit bored, and I was ready to do something new. Anyway, that day in the swimming pool, talking to Ravi, my friend first, business partner later, we talked about ideas, and one thing that came up was car share. Now, car sharing exists in like every major city in Europe, every major city in the United States, and now India, China, all over the place. And we looked into it after this discussion, and we noticed that there was just this big gaping hole in MENA, in the whole Middle East region. It just didn't exist. And we were asking ourselves, why on earth would this not exist? Because it's such a convenient thing. Sort of fast forward now 3 years. We're ranked number 5 on the Forbes list for top startups in the Arab world. We have about 150,000 app downloads in the UAE alone, about 45,000 active members. When I drove to the university today, there's an eCar parked out front of the university, so which is awesome. I don't know, maybe it was one of you guys, but thank you. Is that you?
No.
Okay.
We don't mind.
Okay. But it's been really a magnificent journey to see, and just literally an idea that you have not only be proven by other people that like the idea, but also investors that come in and say, look, we think this is a great idea, and we want to take it to that next level as well. So a couple little tidbits on this. One is that we named the company eCar with an E and a K because it's the call sign for Emirates Airlines flights.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
he
makes
came.
sense, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and why was that? Because we realized that cabin crew, there's 17,000 cabin crew. They live in the accommodation towers that they're provided by Emirates, right? Some at Silicon Oasis, and they have one in TCOM and sort of all of some downtown and so on. And what they are, they're like very large high-rises where they live about typically 2 or 3 cabin crew that live together in an apartment. And they're only in the UAE for like 10 days a month because they're traveling.
Yeah.
They can't necessarily afford, nor would it necessarily make financial sense to buy a car because it's just parked there the whole time. So, and also car rental, especially in this region, is really cumbersome. You basically have to usually go to a kiosk somewhere.
Yeah.
You have to stand in line, you have to give somebody your passport, you gotta scan the passport, there's a guy who needs to have a cigarette break, and then he's trying to find the car, and it's just missing, and scratches, all this whole idea is like a dinosaur in our view. We looked at this like, this is like the most inefficient car ownership as well as a whole, and saying, you know, looking at the studies, people only have a car, they only use a car for 5% of a given 24-hour period. So like, why on earth would you, it's just like the most unbelievably expensive, depreciating asset. As soon as you drive a car off of the lot, it immediately depreciates 25%.
Yes.
It's like, just thinking just general finance or general, you know, your own spending, how does that make sense to you? That you're going to spend your own hard-earned money to buy an asset that's going to depreciate 25%, you're only going to use 5% of your time. It makes much more sense to look at car sharing, is our view, and especially for cabin crew. So that was our vision. We started very small. We looked at cabin crew, and immediately after launching the company, setting up our trade license, our first email to the RTA was in 2013 asking permission to launch. Because the moment we met with Emirates, they're like, we love it, we'll do it. And we're like, whoa. So immediately, our first client's Emirates. And while we were waiting for approval from the RTA, we went and had a chat with Etihad Airways. It was like the best meeting of my life. I've been through a lot of meetings before. But in the middle of the meeting of me pitching this idea, the guys just like, stop. We love it, we'll do it. That was it.
Okay.
And so we actually launched Abu Dhabi first because we didn't have to sort of wait for the RTA. RTA ended up, we helped them build a subcommittee and this whole thing, but ultimately they wanted to go out to tender for this project, which they did. And we competed then, which was frustrating because we had spent so much time working.
Yeah.
But they had looked at this as being what they considered a last mile solution for the city. So from the metro out. And we took that quite seriously. So I literally went to all 87 metro station stops, myself and Remy. We broke it up over 2 weeks and took pictures of all the parking bays. And we submitted that along with a whole bunch of other stuff. It was about a 187-page proposal. And when we submitted all of them, I could actually see the sort of other sizes of the other tenders, and they're like this big. And ours was like this massive thing. I think they just were like, forget it, these guys are working too hard. So we ended up being awarded this contract, which gives us and another company called eDrive the permission to do less than 24-hour car rental in the city of Dubai, which then went from just offering cabin crew solutions to all of a sudden, whoa, we can offer millions of people this solution. And on the back of that, we went out and raised money. And now we've just, I can't officially announce it yet, but we are more or less about a week away from closing our now Series B raise. And to date, we've raised around $16.5 million on the back of this business. So it's moving, and we're already international. So I live now in Riyadh for most of my time. I'm only in Dubai on Sundays. The rest of the time, we are building Riyadh, and we're going to be in Turkey very soon, and Bahrain and Kuwait. So things are moving extremely fast. But anyway, that is a very, very quick synopsis of the last 8 years of my life.
Do you think this fast pace can get a bit overwhelming sometimes?
That's a really good question. So, yes. This is the short answer. So personally, I've always been one to sort of say yes to everything, which I think is it's a good and a bad thing. There was a period about a year and a half ago where I actually had symptoms like gastritis, which is like kind of like where you have acid reflux, and like other things were sort of happening to my body, even due to stress. Like it got to the point where I was trying to take on so much, and also there's no rule book about this. You don't, you know, 2.5 years ago we had 3 employees. Now by the end of the year we'll be at 100. No one teaches you this stuff. You really have to learn and adapt along the way. So stress is a huge part of it. But then you learn also how to connect yourself with mentors. You learn how to hire employees and fire employees very quickly. Sometimes even the people that you consider to be the best employees sometimes need to go because the company will outgrow, and maybe even effectively the company will outgrow me as the CEO at some point. And that's what I'm striving for. That would be this working, would be the point where, you know, it's sort of like, okay, Bill, you've reached that limit. Maybe you'll step over and be something a little bit different in the company because we need to have a gray hair come in and take it to that next level. I don't know. But anyway, I went on a bit on a tangent there. But I think that, you know, training and eating well and all these types of things are equally as important as they are having a good schedule and people that surround you along this sort of entrepreneurial
Makes
journey.
sense.
Yeah.
So when you realized that there is this vacuum in this particular region, how did you communicate this effectively to your target customer segments? That is one big issue as an entrepreneur.
Sure. So that was easier with a homogenous group of people like cabin crew, right? Because then you have like one group. It would be like if we had a really great business solution for Amity University, right? Then what I would do is I'd go to the communications department and say, look, is there a way you guys can send a blast out? Or can we get it maybe, which we did with Emirates, is we had them do a survey, like a survey monkey. Would you be interested in doing a car per minute scheme? Would you be able to, would you be willing to pay how much? And all these kinds of questions. And we sent surveys out. And we got back, and all of a sudden we're getting back surveys that are like 95% of cabin crew would use the service. We're like, well, this is a no-brainer. And then you just go back and show it to the Emirates, decision makers, and they're like, wow, okay, it exists. So I definitively think that there's ways to probe the market without having to spend a lot of money either. SurveyMonkey is a free tool, right? You can build surveys. If you can figure out ways to get to that group of people, if you look on LinkedIn, there's always like groups and things like this that might facilitate you with that kind of thing. Do you have anything particular in mind that you're looking towards?
We've already built a survey, so.
You've already built a survey. Wow, look at you. So yeah, that's definitely one avenue that I'm looking at. Another one is I can't stress enough the importance of having mentors around because, and you guys are lucky in the sense that you have a great university here. There's a lot of great university professors and so on. But however much you can do to try to get some gray hair people in your life. Just the grayer the hair, the better sometimes. Because they've been through it. I mean, and you know, in your particular idea, in your particular sort of sector, that's a great way to mitigate a lot of costs from mistakes. Mistakes are great because you learn from them. But if you can do it in such a way that you make the mistakes that don't cost you a lot of money or the business a lot of money, that's really the idea here, if possible. But the surveys is a great start.
So what do you believe is the most difficult part of being an entrepreneur?
Wow.
You personally. Yeah.
Okay, so let me ask you guys a question. Is everyone here looking to become an entrepreneur?
Yes.
Yeah.
To an extent.
Kind of. Not
Sort
Okay.
of.
Sort of, maybe,
Sort of,
kind
yes.
Yes.
of. Yes, yes. So the guys are yeses,
Yes.
and then a yes. Okay, so it's a, but you got what, and you guys are interested in,
Well, I'm pursuing BCom right now, so I'm more into like, financial advisor position or CFO maybe in
I
the
see.
future.
okay.
But like, yeah, if the opportunity presents itself, I will go forward and start my own business. But right now, it's more about getting a career growth, and then maybe
Perfect.
later in life.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So nice, and a little bit of a mixed bag, which is perfect. So the honest truth about entrepreneurism is that it's extremely difficult.
Yeah.
And the likelihood of one actually sort of making it in that regard, in whatever you think your idea of sort of making it, is a massive challenge in undertaking. I think that it's been like nearly romanticized, this idea of sort of like the American dream maybe, or whatever it is,
Yes.
or like this idea, yeah, kind of thing. But the numbers don't lie, and the statistics don't lie, and the reality is your path, for example, is taking a career job is statistically much more lucrative than it is to try to be an entrepreneur. So you have to be a little bit of a mixed bag here. You need to be, if you're 100% all in with this thing, if you know you want to do it, you have a great idea, you got to be like a little bit crazy, I think, and a risk taker. But that's not to say that it can't be done, because there's so many great examples out there of companies. I mean, they're probably the 1 percentile that have made it through, but those ones can be an extremely rewarding life. I wouldn't say by any stretch that I've made it as an entrepreneur. I'm in the process of being in a growth business, right? We've proven some things. We've definitely been awarded some nice awards and stuff like that. But ultimately, the success, I think, and the measure of success is, it's interesting, because I think about this all the time. Is it to exit the company? Is it like Kareem did and sell for $3.1 billion to Uber? But is that the measure of success? I wonder, is it great to be a very wealthy guy sitting on an island? Is that the measure of success? I wonder more if the measure of success is changing people's lives and helping communities and doing things. So I would argue that it's an interesting journey, because having a career job, you have a corporate ladder that you're going to be climbing, and you have your own KPIs that are structured, and you have your own salary expectations that are structured, and so on. Being an entrepreneur, you have to be kind of creative about the whole process. You have to think to yourself, okay, do I feel personally inside that and sometimes there's a void there. It's a little bit challenging, but that shouldn't stress you out. It should just be a good learning tool to understand that no one's going to give you the keys to the kingdom with whatever you do. No one's going to make you a CFO overnight. All of this stuff takes work, right? But it'll be interesting to see sort of, again, I think that if you're looking towards doing an entrepreneurial route, though, just make sure that you have all of the bases covered first. You've done a business plan. You've done the market research. You've set up all of the building blocks of building a nice foundation before you take the ultimate leap. Because all too often you'll see companies that haven't really spent a whole lot of time on the upfront stuff, and I'm happy to walk through how a lot of that stuff would work in my experience, and just go head first immediately, and then find themselves a year down the road having lost a lot of money and having lost their way. Anyway, I can talk about that for a while.
So how is it easy to make like decisions now as an entrepreneur? Isn't it very difficult to make the right decisions? Because I see that like in the world today, everyone's making the wrong decision. So is it? So oh my gosh, my question is. My question is, what are the worst decisions you've made that we could learn from? Like
some experiences that we could get.
That's a really good question. Wow. So interesting. So I think if you're a business owner, you make decisions all day long.
Yeah.
If you are a disrupting business, which we are to some degree, we're disrupting ride-hailing. The average Kareem ride or Uber ride in the UAE is 14 minutes long. The average e-car ride is about 75 minutes. So it's still a short time, but it's not perfectly overlapping, but we attack this market. But the average the car rental is a day rental. So we're attacking that market as well. We're disrupting this industry. By doing this and being first out the gate, the first car share in the Middle East, we had to make decisions that we have no idea of the outcome. And we make decisions and oftentimes they're wrong. I think one of the things about making decisions that are wrong also is that I personally feel that you don't notice a difference in your trajectory. If you make, later you might say, oh, that was a good decision because nothing was disrupted or nothing got screwed up or anything. But sometimes you'll make a decision that you will consider to be a mistake, but it will shift your business in line where it actually is supposed to be. I've made some mistakes. I made some hiring mistakes. That's a big one. One thing I could say is that along the journey, if you're fortunate enough to be in a business that starts from zero and then grows into a bigger business, you'll learn quickly that someone who is perfect for a position at one stage is going to quickly not make sense at a later stage. And that was, I don't know if that's necessarily a mistake, but I had a manager that I hired to begin with that, sort of after a year, that didn't make a whole lot of sense anymore for us. So we had to put somebody else who made a bit more sense. We've also found that maybe a couple other sort of theoretical mistakes we've made is in fundraising. So if you're looking to fundraise in the Middle East, especially if you're looking to fundraise for Middle Eastern money, my suggestion would be to go the VC route now. Is everyone familiar with
Venture
VC?
capital?
Yes.
Venture capital. So
Yeah.
let me just give a high-level overview of what this stuff means. So there are VCs or venture capital firms that now exist in the Middle East region, and they didn't exist 10 years ago. Not really. So what's happened over the last 10 years is that there's been a lot of push from the government for startups, like even this whole program, I assume, is probably like newish. Maybe I'm wrong, but at least in the UAE, there's been now, like Dubai has plenty of these different incubation programs. And it even has, like GITEX has a startup whole facility. Now Sharjah took on board the same thing, the Sharjah Entrepreneurship Festival. Abu Dhabi's had some for years. So the government's really pushing and supporting. So all of a sudden there's a bunch of young people are starting new businesses. After all, we're in an emerging market and there's a lot of stuff that just doesn't exist here that they need to build. So they need sort of young people to help build this whole thing out. So on the back of that, then VC companies were born. And what venture capital will typically look like would be sort of a manager who runs the VC, who would then be managing high net worth individuals' money, not all of it obviously, but like a portion of it, that they'll submit to invest into startups. And what I had done in my journey is I hadn't targeted the VCs. And I think that could have been, in retrospect, a bit of a mistake. Because the VCs are really, really good at what they do. And I was surprised by how good the VCs actually are here in the Middle East. What I did was I ended up looking more towards sort of high net worth individuals, or looking at companies that I felt were related companies, maybe car businesses and things like this, or funds as well, like just regular financial funds. And what you find is that this whole grouping, especially in this region, are not as familiar with high growth tech startups. The VCs are, these guys aren't. So oftentimes you'll find that when you're trying to raise money, you get people that will even promise you things. You might even get something in writing and say, hey, we got you. Here's $1 million. We're ready to go at your valuation that you put. Everyone's high-fiving each other. We're ready for this. And then all of a sudden it's like, they're gone. And we don't know why. So I would argue that that's a mistake that I've made time and time again. That I would say definitely like the VC route. That would be a classic move.
Does anyone want to ask this question?
Yeah.
So, do you believe in working hard or working smart?
I think working smart is very important. But I don't think that there's a single possible way that you can get away with starting a business without working 80-hour a week. Now, like there's been a quote, I forget, I think it was from Shark Tank or something, that I think it was, what is it, like Barbara or one of them said this. She's like, it's only an entrepreneur who would give up a paying 40-hour job to take on board an unpaying 80-hour job, right? That it's like you have to be some kind of crazy, I think, in some degree. So I think there's a combo thing here. You gotta work as hard as you possibly can, and you have to work smart wherever possible, and try to stay awake while doing it. I mean, there's no perfect answer for that.
Okay, so what is the main difference between e-car and U-Drive? Because I went to the website and they're more like the same according to me. So what is the main key difference between them both?
So, so car sharing, so I would look at this example sort of like Careem and Uber, although they're now both the same company because Uber bought Careem. But I'm sure you can pick out differences in the two companies by user experience, or have you used Uber or Careem before? Okay, so this is not an easy example to give, but effectively.
But I do know about them.
Okay, fair enough. So, or even you drive an e-car, we both have an app, we both have the ability to unlock a car, and to drive the car and to end a booking somewhere. So the core functionality of which is car sharing, much like in ride hailing with Uber and Careem, you have the ability to book a driver will pick you up and take you to a destination. That core functionality would be the same. The difference is all the other stuff that's around it, which would be the strength of the customer service team, it would be how fast the app is, the user interface of the app, it would be the additional functionality of the app. In this sphere, I would argue, without, which I never would negatively speak about another company, I think this is our strength. So I think one great example would be features that we have on our app, which is unique actually in this entire region now. But also there's only a couple of car share operators that have this in the world. This is one idea would be the proximity notifier. So for example, if we're gonna end at 10, you could set your app to tell you by between 9:50 and 10:30, notify me if a car is within 500 meters of me and it's ready to be booked, and book it for me automatically. You can also, there's a credit system where you can send credits to your friends. You can earn points in credits. All these kinds of things are unique to eCar. The sort of the gamification of this. We also built our own app. We have our own tech team, which are unique elements to us, which our competitors don't have. They're more like licensing their own stuff.
So, sir, you came to the university by an e-car too, or?
Yeah.
You came to university by an e-car, or just?
Actually, I drive e-cars all the time. This particular day today, I didn't, but I will be later this afternoon, actually, because we have a showing. Actually, I have an investor meeting later today, and we're going to be taking these guys out for a late lunch or early iftar or something.
So, actually, I've seen that all your cars are like hi-fi type cars, Infinities and everything. Which car would you say would you prefer the best car to ride in?
So maybe I can give you guys a little sneak information. Well, I can't. Maybe I won't name the brand. So because that can't be released quite yet. But over the course of the next 3 or 4 weeks, we're going to be putting 15 super sports cars out on the streets.
Oh, okay.
So who of you has a driver's license?
1, 2.
Okay. So maybe we'll circle back and we'll send one of them over when they come, and then have you guys.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, but it's actually.
I get my license by that time.
So half of them are going to be convertible, and the other half are going to be like, they're just amazing
It
cars.
is so exciting.
And so what's happened actually on the back of that is there's companies like Tesla, like Volkswagen, Mini Cooper, Infiniti, that have realized that in the UAE market, new car sales are down about 50%.
Yeah.
This is something new that's also happened. We just happen to be at the right place at the right time. We have about 6 drivers driving a car, every day. So these cars are pinging around the city every day. So what better marketing for a car manufacturing company to have people test drive their cars than if I can tell them, don't put a 200,000 dirham billboard on the side of Sheikh Zayed Road, like just so people can look at this thing, have people drive your car. And in order to do that, rather use that marketing spend and give us a discount on your vehicles. And this is what's happened. And with these luxury sports cars, we actually got these for free.
Oh.
Yeah, because this is going to be the very first program in the world that this luxury sports brand is doing in the world of car share. And
Wow.
they're choosing it to do it in Dubai with e-car.
That is
That's
It's
that is
really
amazing.
incredible.
That is
Yeah, it's going to be really, really cool.
That is really exciting.
So you do not have to maintain the maintenance part of these cars. They are all done by the manufacturers.
Sorry, one more time?
The
Yeah,
maintenance.
the maintenance of these
Oh,
cars.
the maintenance contracts that we have with all the car owners includes the comprehensive stuff. So we send the cars back for the 10,000 kilometer maintenance things. But the day-to-day maintenance that happens on the vehicles, that we have to take care of. Now
So how do you manage all that? Because what you charge is way less than what maintenance would cost you.
fair, that is for the fleet of economy cars. So
Oh,
our
okay.
pricing has to be adjusted accordingly, right? In order to perfectly correctly to take care of the maintenance and other ancillary items for a more luxurious car. Right now we have 3 tiers. We have economy, we have premium economy, and we have a business class. And now we're adding on luxury class to that. So each one would have its own pricing sort of tier system. I imagine, off the record or on the record, I guess, it would probably fall around 2 dirhams 99 per minute.
Oh wow,
Wait,
per minute.
for the luxury cars?
Yes. So
Wow.
Okay, that is insane.
it's
That's
considerably more expensive. It will end up being, it will stop at about 6 hours or so. So you'll end up, for renting this luxury sports car for a day, would be exactly 1,000 dirham,
exciting.
which would include the price of fuel. Now, the comparable luxury vehicle in the open car rental market would be north of 2,000 dirhams. So it's still half the price of this. So it's still a good deal, even if you're going to rent it for the day.
And do you get like the fuel incentives from the government or
No.
It's all covered by you.
No, that's covered by us. Although we asked for it, but unfortunately, we're I don't think I don't know for certain, but as I've understood it, there are no discounts to any commercial companies. I mean, we have a fleet of 500 cars. We spend a considerable amount of fuel. One of the things that we're doing to try to circumvent that is, one, we've introduced the first Tesla car share program in the world. That's in Abu Dhabi, and it's being launched next week.
Oh.
So these are the Model X, the ones
Yes.
we
Yes.
Yes.
and we have a couple Model S's as well. The difficulty there is that there's not a whole lot of charge stations. Abu Dhabi has about 50, and Dubai has about 100. So in order to have what we call a free-floating program, where cars can be driven anywhere, we really need to have a strong infrastructure, a strong network of these plugs, which they have in like a country like Norway, where I'm from. You have priority parking bays. You're able to actually access certain parts of the city, which you wouldn't be allowed to in a combustible engine car because you have an electric car. So because it's more quiet, and also it's like a governmental sort of grant,
Okay.
because they're saying, look, it's better for the environment.
Yeah.
They're
We'll give
promoting
you,
it.
exactly, and then
That's so.
your offset taxes and these kinds of things. So the future of e-car, that not only the name EK for e-car, but also the E being an electric component, was an idea behind the name as well. So at some point, we're going to look towards moving in that direction. But it's going to be challenging until we have enough stations in Dubai someday.
How do you go about risk mitigation, and what are the strategies that you use?
For risk for for accidents and incidents.
In general, from the business point of view.
Okay.
No threats, basically.
Right. So we're looking at sort of a SWOT analysis kind of risk.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's risks associated with every element of the business, right? So you want to carve out, if you're doing a risk assessment, I mean, there's strategy behind this to the nth degree. In fact, part of my background is ISO 9001 or Quality Management Systems Implementation, which also looks at risk. So there's a plethora of information on how to do this, but on a high level, you'd be looking at department by department within your company. So let's say you have fleet management, then you have finance, then you have other operations, then you have HR, for example, and then for each one of these departments, you would then be conducting your own risk assessment of that department. Now, for, let's say, IT, we have, there could be a massive amount of risk on the tech side of this stuff. How exposed are we? How easy is it for a customer service agent to download an Excel file of your usernames? I don't know, whatever. So you have to be very conscientious, abiding by the 27001 IT ISO regulations to make sure that we're covered in that regard. You're looking at human resources, then we want to make sure that we're abiding by the laws of the land, that we're not doing anything that falls outside of protocol for hiring or firing of employees, because you can get caught in all kinds of different ways doing things. So you want to make sure that you have a strong HR team. So you'd be looking at each one of these elements. Finance, of course, is a massive risk. You need to know, for example, on the banking side of things, we've noticed that banks made mistakes along the way. Sometimes they've, for example, they've cashed checks that might not have had the correct signatories on them. Things, small things. I mean, they can be big things, right? So it's a constant sort of mitigation of risk. Now, on the user side, we want to also make sure that people are driving these vehicles safely. So on the fleet management and user side, we're then looking to ensure that every new user that comes on board, that there's no red flags on their driving license and so on, that they're above the ages of their insurance policy, that their credit card is actually able to be run, such that if there's any items that come up, that we could put a claim on for those kinds of things. And knock on wood, there haven't been any serious accidents. There's been a couple of cars that have been sort of totaled, but no serious bodily injury to any of our users. And I'm very obviously thankful for that. But a lot of those kinds of things come from all these small bits and pieces, right? And there's not one particular risk element that makes more sense than another. It's a constant job. And especially as you're growing, it just requires more and more work. And most large companies will have an entire risk department. That's all they do, is just look at risk all day long and mitigate and see how that works. Actually, a close friend of mine is the head of risk and compliance for ADNOC.
Yeah.
And the level of work that he's doing is just unprecedented. He obviously hasn't told me about specific projects and so on, but I mean, you can just think of such a mammoth organization. Every stone is turned to just make sure that there's nothing that they can get caught with or that can cause any injury or harm to any of the employees or users. So I don't know if that addressed the question well enough, but there's a lot there, yeah.
So basically you started out by giving the economic cars to people and everything, but now you're giving super awesome cars to everyone, and that they don't have to pay for fuel or maintenance. So
we're not giving them, but
they're around to drive it. I mean, a person getting to drive a supercar
That's
saying,
still a really good deal.
Exactly.
Yes, it is. It's
Especially with
I'm driving a Lamborghini down some Jumeirah road, but I don't have to pay for fuel or maintenance.
That's a huge deal.
yeah. I mean, the value prop is there. There's a reason why this works.
And you said I have to pay 2.99 per, or maybe 4 cents per minute. So I'll just drive for 2 minutes just for the show.
Yeah, you can drive just for show.
Exactly.
As,
Show.
as you wish.
Pay 4 cents and then I'm out.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's a very short show. But effectively, the idea and the scalability of e-car as a business is not basis renting vehicles for the day. What we do is we sell minutes.
Yeah.
And to be honest, we really are a tech company that just happens to rent cars. right? I mean, there's no reason whatsoever why we couldn't do the same thing with scooters or
Yeah.
with.
Oh yeah, you can like
It's-
expand to other.
It's happening in America, the scooter. The
It's
scooters.
happening here in Dubai too.
Oh, is
Yeah,
it?
yeah, yes, it is.
Oh.
So I just flew in from Norway yesterday. And in Norway, they're all over the place, these electric scooters. It's nearly like visual pollution at some point. People just throw them down and then they're just lying everywhere. But Dubai got like that. There was, I think, something like 1,000 scooters at one point in time from about 6 different competing companies. And then the RTA shut it down, and of course, because they're going to tender. It's a similar story to our journey as well. But I mean, this again is these are discussions on what's known as mobility, which are effectively is a fancy word for getting around.
Yeah.
And scooters are micro-mobility.
Right.
And it's interesting, but to put things in perspective, a scooter, the cost that they were billing here for a scooter ride was going to be 50 fills per minute. So 1 dirham every 2 minutes, which is the exact same cost as driving one of our economy cars. So if you just think about that in perspective, you're like, whoa, the unit economics are much better, and this is
Yeah.
theoretically. But then again, a scooter lasts for 3-4 months until it's broken. They haven't cracked that code. They don't know how well they'll last in 50-degree Fahrenheit heat. It hasn't been proven yet. There's all kinds of different things like that. Going back to your risk assessment as well. These would be things that you could look at all day long.
Yeah.
But the reality is, a company like eCar, what we're doing is we're like putting our blinders on, like a racehorse, and we're just focused, dedicated to car sharing and everything in the world that focuses on that aspect. I think what you'll come to see moving forward would be things like adapting this model, which is something that you constantly have to do, constantly revisit. We're going to mobility conferences, looking at all the new ideas that are out there. The big thing that will be coming up would be peer-to-peer sharing.
Okay.
Okay.
So what we came to realize, there's a company that tried this in Dubai called Friendly Car. They ended up going under here or closing their operations here because everyone familiar with peer-to-peer?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's where you're basically giving your own car.
Yeah.
So you're in class all day. You're like, you know what? I'll turn my car on to be booked by other people, like an Airbnb of my own car.
Yeah.
So we looked at that. I don't know necessarily if there's an appetite for that here in the UAE, but there would be in Turkey, I would imagine, and there very much could be in a country like Bahrain. So these are things and elements that we're looking at as well. There's also new ways of just generally leasing cars these days, which are very interesting. Car rental the last year has gone down 35% in the UAE. As I mentioned earlier, new car sales down 50%. So the whole market is overflowing with cars right now.
Yeah.
If you want to buy a car, especially in Ramadan, now this year, it's time to get a car. If you really want one, but my suggestion again is just join eCar. You don't have to buy a car. But if you
Yeah.
desperately wanted to buy a car, right now would be the perfect time to get it, because there's so much out there.
Yeah.
So we're obviously taking an extreme amount of advantage of that situation. Again, going back to the fact that entrepreneurism is not all about skill or how smart you are or anything like that. A lot of this has to do with just dumb luck.
Right time, right place.
Right time, right place. Again, like I think 20% of it is the idea, 80% of it is just execution and luck. That's it. I'm telling you.
So how important is research and development like right now, because your company is already in the growth stage, right? So do you still have a lot of expense or like finance invested into research and development?
100%. So what we look at is unit economics. So right now I can tell you down to the dirham how much a car will cost me. So just to put things in perspective, it takes a car in Dubai 5 hours, about 5.1 hours actually, of drive time on average to break gross profit. Gross profit meaning that the car
Yes.
pays for itself.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's paying for the staff costs and keeping the lights on. It's just the car pays for itself. Gross
Yeah.
profitability. 5.1 hours. That is a lot of drive time.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is in many ways it's because of municipal fees and parking things and fuel costs and all the elements put together. And a large chunk of that also is our tech stack. You take a city like Abu Dhabi, though, it only takes 2.5 hours of drive time
Yeah.
to make Roosevelt. You take a country like Saudi Arabia, it only takes 2.6 hours. So there's a combo effect here of we're raising money. Does it make financial sense for us to spend a lot of marketing in Dubai, for example, where we have 3,800 app openings every day in Dubai, but only 1,000 bookings occur because we don't have enough cars on the road. There's way too much demand than there's supply. So does it make more sense for us to spend money on marketing, or does it make more sense for us to spend money on research and development to try to figure out how do we get the unit economic costs down? So in the journey of eCar, how we started is we started with like an out-of-the-box solution from a company in Germany called Inverse, which we flew. It's like the gold standard for car share tech. They do the software and hardware piece. So we went in there, got the out-of-the-box solution. We could launch the business, but we quickly came to realize that, look, this is really expensive. Each iBox, as it's called, each of these hardware units that we have to take, it takes 2 hours to install on every car, are costly, like €1,000 per box. The cost of the software licensing fee that we had was a cost per car. It's variable, and there's fixed costs and so on. So it ends up being that the cost, let's say give or take now, even with the unit economics pushing that down, we've gotten it to be about 280 dirhams per car. Again, it's critical when I'm talking about these numbers, these are specific numbers, and just as a caveat, when you're running a business, you have to know your numbers like this, right? So it costs 280 dirhams for us per car per month for our tech stack and our hardware unit. So what we've done is we've spent close to about $2 million at this point on our own tech team, and half of their functionality has been focused on building our in-house tech. So we've launched our very own app, as I mentioned earlier. Before we had a sort of a licensed app. Now we have our own app that we can have in-house. We own the IP. It makes the value of our company increase as well, because you have full visibility and you reduce your risk. We've also looked at these iBox units. We're like, wait a second, why on earth can't we just have our own built iBox unit instead of paying €1,000 per? So now, and then we're looking at the software system. You're like, oh, this stuff is built on .NET, and our tech guys, graduated school in our masters of systems that are way beyond .NET. This is old school stuff. So over the course of the next 4 to 6 months, we're going to have completely removed this out-of-the-box solution, have everything in-house, thus reducing 240 dirham per car cost out of our situation, which if you multiply that over a fleet of, let's say, 4,000 or 5,000 cars, we're talking really big numbers, which will then end up paying for the cost that you spend investing into the tech itself. So it's a really good question. It's something that's critically important. And the other thing is that just because somebody has an idea, let's say the Entertainer. Everyone know the Entertainer app,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
There's now a company I've heard about that does similar but different coupon situation in Bahrain. And instead of, and it exists in the US as well, instead of doing it just a 2-for-1, which is very much a benefit to the person going to the restaurant, what they're doing is they're giving the benefit to the restaurant first by saying, look, we're going to have a variable pricing, so we'll fill your restaurant on dead times. So between the hours, I don't know, like 3 p.m. and 6 p.m. or something, restaurants are empty because no one's there. Then the app will notify you that food will be half off or whatever, and then you can have an app that's for free.
Right, that makes
So if you look at that, that could be a better value prop than the Entertainer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the idea is that you have to constantly be looking at research and development, trying to figure out also what the competitors are up to, because there could be something very simple, like the idea of Uber that was, in theory, kind of a simple idea in many ways. It was revolutionary, but now it's very simple. You can start your own ride-hailing company in 3 weeks if you want to now. They have out-of-the-box solutions. You just go online and you can compete with Uber, right? Are you going to? Probably you don't want to, but you can do it. And the idea is simply that Uber came in, there's just a better way of doing something, and then the taxi systems around the world, more or less, have suffered immensely from that.
True.
Just like pirating music. All of a sudden there was like these guys from Napster came along, and they figured out a way to like, look, we'll just connect people together that have just burned CDs, and all of a sudden overnight the music industry was worth next to nothing. So, I mean, it's the only consistency in this whole thing is change, and research and development is the key to being on top of your game and not being caught out. Yeah.
So, sir, if you had the chance to open the same e-car in any other country, which country would you choose and why?
So we've already launched in Saudi as of 6 months ago, or 8 months ago now. Time flies. Speaking of awarding great contracts, the first contract we landed in Saudi Arabia was with Saudi Aramco, which is like the world's wealthiest company. It has more money than Apple.
Wow.
And runs all the oil of Saudi Arabia. They're like, we love car share. Let's go ahead and do this kind of thing. And it's amazing. So Saudi, I would say, we're in the compounds now, but we're launching in Riyadh in the next couple of months. That is going to be a big area of focus. But other countries would be Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, but very, very importantly would be Turkey.
So right now, like the Middle East,
The Middle East
and
is-
Middle East and Turkey.
yeah.
But I would say that the sky's the limit. I mean, we've been getting phone calls from like just governments. We've been getting phone calls from the last one was from Azerbaijani government. Like, look, Baku needs this. Baku needs e-car. Like, oh my goodness, it's a dream come true.
Yeah,
Right?
really.
But then again, you got to make sure that you're growing at a pace that you can keep up with.
Yeah.
Very quickly, you can grow yourself to death, and then that's also not a great thing. But I like Turkey because they're the Uber and Cream, they don't exist there. And it's not that they don't exist, but they're illegal there.
Okay.
The government shut them down last
Oh.
year. So all of a sudden, ride-hailing is not an option, so car share could fit nicely. But again, this comes on the back of research and development.
Yeah.
Looking at the markets, seeing what's out there, doing the work.
Why haven't you expanded towards Asian countries more? Because the population is more. So
Well-
wouldn't that be more?
Well, we're talking about India, for example.
India, China.
So India actually has quite a number of car
Yeah,
sharing
that's
companies.
Yes, they do.
One of them is Zoomcar.
Yeah.
Zoomcar, Greg Moran, who's the CEO, is a close friend of mine.
Oh,
He was
wow.
actually inspired me to start eCar, to some degree. So Greg and the other 3 or 4 players really dominate that market for India. India, of course, with 1 billion people, that's a massively
Yeah.
interesting,
Yeah.
Market,
interesting
yeah.
market. The Gulf, it doesn't have as many people, and there's so many different countries, different rules and regulations. So it's a much more challenging growth strategy.
Yeah.
But I see opportunities in countries like Egypt. I see opportunities in countries like Turkey and so on that they wouldn't necessarily have the acumen to get over on that side. I think there's a definite barrier to some degree with doing business and focusing heavily on Asia and sort of India, and then cracking the code and understanding work ethic in the Gulf region. It's just a different breed. I think it would be difficult for any, for example, European car share company to just sort of say we're starting in,
The dynamics are
yeah,
different.
it's that, yeah, there's a huge learning curve. I think here you have to understand the culture and the people, and I don't think that happens overnight.
Okay, so the final question
Okay.
for today is,
Wow.
what is your advice to students who are present here and watching who want to venture into the entrepreneurship world?
What is my advice
Yeah.
to them? So number one, it would be surround yourself with, as I mentioned earlier, with gray hairs, with mentors. Get as much advice as humanly possible. And it's not just 1 or 2. Ask advice from anyone. Ask advice from your parents, or ask you from your college professors. Ask industry experts. get advice before starting, and that would be the key element in my view. Second is that without a business plan, you're not going anywhere. So have a business plan built, and build your business plan as such that it can be tried and tested. A business plan is not 5 PowerPoint slides saying, here's my idea, and here's why it will work, and this is a business plan has to include projections, financials, it's got to have the whole works, and it has to be stress tested, and this has to be reviewed by as many gray hairs as possible as well. The third element, which we touched on also, would be looking at doing surveys and seeing what other kinds of information you can get out there before launching out. I think if you have those elements, and you're a bit of a risk taker, and you're a bit of a nut, then I think at that point you might be ready to embark. That would be my best advice.
Just a final question.
Yeah.
It's like sometimes we young people, when we are thinking of starting up our own business and bringing up something new, we tend to like hit a blockade. We think that this thing is already there. Like we want to bring something new, but when we research about it and want to get it done, we find that it's already there. So, what do you think that is it actually there, or is it we need more experience to find something?
The market research will tell you if it's actually there or not, right? But what's interesting is that it's not always the first company out the gate that is a successful one. Actually, if you do the research on it, it's oftentimes the second or third company that ends up taking over the whole market. Because what they do is they learn from the mistakes of the guys that broke the barrier. Facebook came after MySpace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, a million people would have told these guys, what are you doing? Like, MySpace exists. It's awesome.
Exactly.
I can load my song on my page. But they're like, no, it's a cleaner, better way of doing it. So just because someone else does it doesn't mean you can't do
Yeah.
it better. So don't be discouraged by competition. Competition actually just boosts you up. But obviously, be smart about your approach and then ask for advice on the business plan and make sure that it jives with something that has the possibility of competing with what exists. Yeah?
Thank you so much, sir, for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here. We are very honored, and I'm sure I speak for all of us when we say we're really inspired by this.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Hi. How are ya?
Good, how are you?
Nice to see you.
Not bad.
Here you go. I just returned the favor.
Really?
He brought me flowers on my birthday like
Aw.
last week.
We're
So
old friends.
yeah. How are you guys?
Good.
Still home give you plenty of knowledge and
Very much,
information?
yes.
Good.
We're so excited to take it back.
Good. I was going to suggest he come, and then I look at the thing today. The first thing in the email was, I was like, hey. Hi there.
That was
So
awesome.
good.
It was amazing
They were
talking
great.
to him.
Yeah,
It was
of
so
course.
good.
Very knowledgeable. Cool, you have time to visit?
Yeah. Everyone, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank you so
much.
Is there anything else for them?
Yes, the mugs.
mugs.
The mugs.
The mugs. Oh, you have to do a mug. It was warm.